Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving headfirst into a really fascinating puzzle that sits at the heart of literally every language. It's this incredible story of two massive competing forces that are constantly shaping the very words we speak every single day.
I mean, think about it. How does a single, massive language, like Latin, spoken all across the Roman Empire, how does it just splinter and evolve into a bunch of totally distinct languages, like French and Spanish and Italian? And then, here's the other side of the coin. How can that same exact process of change let a language bump up against another one, borrow thousands of words, and actually become richer and more powerful because of it?
Well, it turns out these two things are driven by two fundamental forces. On one side, you've got divergence, which is pulling languages apart, and on the other, you have convergence, which is bringing them together. Honestly, if you can wrap your head around these two, you're on your way to understanding how language itself really works.
Okay, so let's start with divergence. And we're going to use the biggest case study of them all, the story of what happened to Latin after the fall of the Roman Empire.
Now, this is where the story you think you know takes a really sharp turn. The common assumption, right, is that the moment Rome fell, Latin just exploded into a million pieces. But the historical evidence, it tells a completely different story. Turns out that's pretty much a myth. For centuries, the language people actually spoke stayed surprisingly unified.
So why? What was the glue holding it all together? Well, even though the political empire was gone, these new, powerful connections were forming. You had international trade routes buzzing with activity. You had Christianity spreading out from Rome. And you had people from all over making these huge religious pilgrimages. And they were all talking to each other, interacting in the same common language.
So if it wasn't the collapse of the empire, what was it? What was that final push, that tipping point that sent what people were speaking, vulgar Latin, careening down totally different paths? The answer, amazingly, wasn't politics. It was social. It was about culture. In France, this kind of democratic spirit emerged, where everything, poetry, songs, official business, was being done in the language of the everyday person. And that just put language change into overdrive. But down in Italy and Spain, the elite, the aristocracy, they held on tight to classical Latin as the ideal. That acted like an anchor, slowing down the pace of change for everybody else. The languages didn't just drift apart, you see. They were actively pulled apart by deep cultural differences.
Okay, let's switch gears and look at the opposite force, convergence. And for this, there's no better example than the incredible centuries-long story of Arabic and its impact on Spanish.
Think about this for a second. After almost 800 years of contact on the Iberian Peninsula, a whopping 8% of the entire modern Spanish dictionary comes directly from Arabic. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of words that are just completely woven into the DNA of the language.
And look, these are not some obscure academic terms. We're talking about really common, everyday words, like the word for your pillow, almohada, or a little concept you might have heard of, algebra. Even one of the most beautiful words in Spanish, ojalá, which means hopefully, comes straight from the Arabic phrase washallah, and God willing. How cool is that?
But this was about so much more than just swapping words for new kinds of food or clothes. No, this was a deep, profound transfer of science, medicine, and philosophy. So how on earth did that happen?
Well, it happened through one of the most incredible intellectual projects in history. It was like a great pipeline. First, all the amazing works of Greek science and philosophy were saved, preserved by being translated into Arabic. Then, for hundreds of years, Arab scholars didn't just copy it. They built on it, expanded it, and finally, in these amazing multicultural hubs like Toledo in Spain, all of that knowledge was translated again, from Arabic into Latin and Spanish. And that is what helped kickstart a renaissance across all of Europe. Language was the vehicle.
So, we've seen divergence in action. We've seen convergence. But what's the actual engine driving all this? What's going on in our brains that makes all of this change even possible?
Well, the leading theory right now is something called the usage-based model. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it's so powerful. It says our brains aren't running on some rigid pre-installed grammar software. Instead, our internal grammar is shaped by our experiences. Every single conversation, every sentence we hear, every word we say. It's constantly updated. So how does that actually play out? Well, a key principle, as the linguist Joan Bybee says, is that repetition leads to reduction. Basically, the more we say something, the more efficient our brains want to be. It's like cognitive muscle memory.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. We don't perfectly pronounce
I am going to the store every single time, right? These super calming phrases get smoothed out. They get compressed, like a well-worn path in the woods. Going to becomes gonna. I don't know becomes I don't know. It's just our brain taking the most efficient route it can find, a cognitive shortcut.
And here's the kicker. This exact same process, this hunt for efficient connections, is what helps explain convergence, the borrowing between languages. In fact, a 2024 study of bilingual kids shows this perfectly. It found that language skills transferred way more easily between Spanish and English than between Chinese and English. So why? Simple. Spanish and English just have more in common structurally. There are more existing pathways, more shortcuts for the brain to find and use. Our brains are literally built to find those connections.
Okay, so let's zoom out. After all this, what's the big, crucial takeaway we should all leave with?
It's this. The story of any language is basically a constant tug-of-war between these two huge forces. You've got divergence, the force of separation and isolation, pulling things apart and creating new languages, and then you have convergence, the force of human contact and connection, always weaving them back together. What this all means is that language is not some dusty, static set of rules in a textbook. It's a living, breathing thing. It's an artifact that is a direct reflection of human history, of culture, of trade, and of every single conversation that you and I have every single day.
And that leaves us with one last kind of mind-blowing thought to chew on. If we are the engine of change, if every word we speak is pushing and pulling our language in new directions, what exactly is it that we're turning it into right now?